All right, we now are in Tinkercad. And we're going to start by making our basic game piece that I sketched out earlier. And if you remember correctly from the sketch, it was comprised of two shapes, a sphere and paraboloid. So let's find those. If you go over to the right here, under basic shapes, you can take any of these shapes and drag it in. So here's a sphere, I'm going to drag it in. And then if I scroll down, I'm going to find this white thing that is called the paraboloid because it looks like a parabola. And I'm going to drag it in. And those are my two shapes. Now, what I want to do is size those shapes. And I'm going to start by sizing the paraboloid. And the way I'm going to do that is by clicking on this white dot here. And you'll see my dimensions come up for the X and the Y, or length and width. And I can click on here and type in new numbers. I'm going to type in 15 and 15. And I know that's millimeters because down here at SnapGrid it says 1.0 mm, which stands for millimeters. I could drag this as well if I wanted to, but it is much better to just type in the numbers because it's more accurate. Perfect. So I'm going to take my paraboloid, put it off to the side, bring my sphere over here, and you notice when I drag it around it stays parallel to the work plane. And if you remember my sphere, which was the head of the game piece, it was going to be 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters. Uh-oh, that doesn't look like a sphere anymore. That's because I changed the length and width, but not the height. So how do I get access to the height? Well, it's this white dot on top here. I can click on that and type in 10 and hit return. And now I have a perfect sphere. Great. So if I move the sphere over here now, it looks great, but it's the wrong height. I need it to be up here. But when I click and drag, all it does is move parallel or on the work plane. So how do you move it up? Well, this black arrow here allows you to move it up, and I'm going to move it up 20 millimeters. You'll notice I can click here and type a number as well, or drag, but I'm starting with 20. And now when I move the sphere, it still moves parallel to the work plane, but it's at the right height. So I'm going to move it over to get it on top of my paraboloid. And now if I rotate around, I can see it's not perfect. So I'm going to orbit around a little more. It's still not perfect. Orbit around. You can see it's a little tricky. So how can you get it perfect? Well, there's something called the Align tool. So how do you do that? Well, you got to select two objects that you want to align. But to do that, you click off of the object onto empty space. And you click and drag and get this red dotted line box and select both objects. Now this tool is available, and that's the Align tool. And if I click on it, you get all these dots. I want to center it on the X and Y axis. So I'm going to click the middle dot here, and that will center it left and right, and the middle dot there, and that will center it back and forth. If I click off and orbit around, that looks great. However, what I don't like is that the paraboloid and the sphere, the head, aren't connected that much. That'll be a weak point with 3D printing. So I'm going to make this paraboloid a little taller. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to click on this white dot and move it up into the sphere until I think it looks right. That looks good. Orbit around as always to make sure it looks good. That looks great. Now there's one last step. Since I want this to be one object, I need to combine it or group it. And again, to group it, you have to select all the objects you want to group. So I'm going to click and drag to select both objects. And then there's this icon up here that looks like a square and a circle combined, and that's called group. And I'm going to click on it. And you'll know it worked when it turns all the same color. And there's my game piece. And as you can see, the length and width are 15 millimeters and the height is 30 millimeters. I could adjust things now as well once they're combined, but it will adjust the whole group, not just the individual shapes. All right, why don't you try it now? See if you can make your own simple game piece. Then come back and I'll show you how to make a more complicated game piece and introduce you to new skills. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you want more ideas and hands-on courses, check out my courses at makeshiftedtech.com, where you can also get one-on-one live support.